I'm me in this kind of state of mind, this situation, or I'm me in this kind of situation, and select the right state of mind to be in. And I think that really does speak to this sort of notion of multiple consciousnesses that cohabit your brain or your generative model, and again speaks to this notion of I'm just wondering whether that can be linked to this notion of incompleteness in a broader sense, that I'm constantly seeking for the way in which I complete you in terms of dyadic interactions, which means I have to recognize what kind of person do you expect me to be in this setting. And of course, I can only do that if I actually have an internal model that is about me. It's a model that actually have this attribute of selfhood, but specifically selfhood appropriate to this context or this person or this situation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I have a question about that. You said that you have different identities that you then select from to see which one's most appropriate for the circumstance, like a hypothesis. And is it the case then that you would say that there are multiple consciousnesses inside your brain? Or is it more like you have multiple potential consciousnesses, and then as soon as you select one, that makes it actual?
I don't know that. I would imagine that you'd have to have another deeper layer of your generative model that then recognizes the selection process. And indeed, this may sound fanciful, but there are naturalized in terms of inference schemes, models of consciousness that actually do invoke, and I'm thinking here of the work of people like Lars Sandstad-Smith, who that explicitly have three levels, and each level, a deep generative model, very much like a sort of deep neural network. And the role of each level is to provide the right attention heads or biasing or precision or contextualization for the processing that goes on below. So it may well be that to get the kind of self-awareness, if I now read awareness as deploying mental action in the service of setting the precision or the gating of various communications or processing lower down in the model, it may well be that you need you do need another layer of sophistication or depth to your generative models that I suspect trees don't have, but certainly you have. Or I can infer that you have, given I'm assuming that I have a similar conception of consciousness. But I'm not sure that really speaks to your question or the one that Joshua was posing, that the unitary aspect of consciousness, and does that transcend an inference that would simply be biophysically instantiated in exactly the same way that I can register visual motion in motion sensitive area V5 in my posterior cortex? I don't know about that. I'll pass back to Joshua on that one.
Again, we need a very narrow definition, the very tight definition of consciousness to answer this question in a meaningful way. If we see consciousness as something that we vaguely gesture at, and there could be multiple things in our understanding, and it becomes almost impossible to say something meaningful about this. So, for instance, it is conceivable that consciousness would be implemented by a small set of circuits in the brain, and that all the different contents that can experience themselves as consciousness are repurposing this shared functionality. In the same way as we probably have only one language center, and this one language center can be used to articulate ideas from many parts of our mind using different sub-agents that basically interface with this. You can also clearly have multiple selves interacting on your mind. Your personal self is one possible self that you can have that represents you as a person. But there are some people which have God talking to them on their own mind. And I think what happens there is people implement a self that is existing and self-identifying as existing across minds. something that is not a model of the interests of the individual person, but a model of a collective agent that is implemented using the actions of the individual people. But of course, this collective mind that assumes the voice of God and talks to you in your own mind so you can perceive it is still implemented on your own mind and uses your circuitry. It's just that your circuitry is not yours. Your brain doesn't belong to yourself. Yourself is a creation of your own mind that symbolizes this person. People who don't say that God doesn't exist forget that often that they themselves don't really exist in physics. This thing that they experienced as perceiving, as interacting with the world is a dream. It's a dream of what it would be like if you were a person that existed. It's virtual, right? So you can also dream being a god. And this God might be so tightly implemented on your mind that it's able to use your language center and you hear its voice talking to you. But it's not more or less real than you hearing your own voice talking to you in your mind, right? It's just an implementation of a representation of agency in your mind. One crucial difference to the way in which most AI systems are implemented right now and the way in which agency is implemented on our minds is that we usually write functions in AI that perform something like 100 steps in a neural network, for instance, and then gives a result that makes the programmer happy. And this is it. And the time series predictions of our own mind are dynamic. They're not meant to solve a particular function, but they're meant to track reality. So in a sense, our brain is more like a very complex resonator that tries to go into resonance with the world. So it creates a harmonic pattern that continuously tracks your sensory data with the minimal amount of effort. And this perspective is very different. Really means your perception of the world cannot afford to deviate too much in its dynamics from the dynamics that you observe in your sensory apparatus, because otherwise future predictions become harder. You get out of sync. You always try to stay in sync with the world. And this thing that you stay in sync is really crucial for the way in which we experience ourselves with the world. As part of staying in sync, we discover our own self is the missing link between volition and the outcomes of our action. Right? Our body would not be discoverable to us and is not immediately given to us if we wouldn't have this loop that ties us into the outer universe and into the stuff that we cannot control directly. And for me, this question relates to, do we have only one consciousness? It occurs to me that we would not know if we have multiple ones, if they don't share memories. Right? If I were to set up an AI architecture where a part of the AI architecture is a model of an agent in the world, another part of the AI architecture is a model of the infrastructure that I need to maintain to make a model of the world and such an agent in the world, I would not tell the agent how this infrastructure works, because the agent might use that knowledge to game the architecture and get a better outcome for itself, not the organism, right? Imagine you could game your perception so you're always happy, no matter how much you're failing in the world. From the perspective of the larger architecture, that's not desirable. So it would probably remain hidden from you how you implement it. And to me, the question is interesting. How sentient is this part of you that is not yourself? Does it actually know what it is in real time? I think it's a very interesting and tempting philosophical question. And also a practical one. Maybe there's a neuroscientific experiment that would figure out if you have two clusters of conscious experience. I wouldn't know how to measure this, but right? Maybe IIT and global workspace theory and so on are wrong in more interesting ways than we currently think they are, because they assume that there is just one consciousness. Of course, from the perspective of one consciousness, there is only one, because consciousness is, in some sense, by definition, what's unified. But if there are multiple clusters of unification that exist quite simultaneously, they wouldn't know each other directly. They could maybe observe each other, but maybe not in both directions.
If you enjoyed that clip, then the full podcast is out right now. You can click around here. Enjoy. Subscribe to Theories of Everything to get notified of upcoming podcasts, as there are new full-length podcasts every week on the topics of mathematics, physics, consciousness, free will, and AI.